Alright, welcome back to Six Flags 5-year development plan. This is talking about another Six Flags park added to the new Six Flags Cedar Fair merger, Darien Lake. Of course, Darien Lake is not completely owned by Six Flags, but I did check and Six Flags still does operate this park, which means that this will still be in the new Six Flags big merged company's portfolio. So Six Flags can still add things to Darien Lake if they so choose. So I will give you a 5-year development plan that I think will happen for Six Flags Darien Lake starting right now. So Six Flags Darien Lake is a bigger park, but not as big as like Six Flags Great America or Great Adventure. It would be a mid-level sized park. The reason why we're talking about it right now is because it is not completely independent, but it is also not completely operated by Six Flags. So it's kind of like a 50-50 split. Park has its own independent operators, but is also partly operated by Six Flags. So Six Flags can still change things in the park and add things to the park, remove things in the park if they so choose. So let's begin. So Six Flags Darien Lake has a water park, so we don't really need to add one, so that kind of takes a big chunk out of our development plan, because if they've already got a water park, that saves us a lot of money and time, because like we said with LaRon desperately needed a water park, but this one's already got one, so it already has a Splashwater Kingdom. We don't need to add another one. And it has a lot of rides. It has probably one of the greatest intimate coasters of all time, Ride of Steel. It also has a big wooden coaster that may need a little bit of track work, and it has some weird and funky coasters that still exist, like a Gerst Flower Eurofighter, an old aero looping machine, and a SLC. So if we look at the map for Darien Lake, we have a lot of open land to deal with. We have a lot of patches off to the right-hand side. We have a giant forest by the go-kart track and Viper. We've got some space by the main gate to work with, some space in the middle of the park, and we've got two main bodies of water to work with. A fun-sized lake near the Boomerang and Moto Coaster, and we also have a camping lake over by Predator and by the lodge on the lake that we can put some things in the lake if we so choose. So of course, Six Flags Darien Lake is a Six Flags operated park. Of course, it's not all the way controlled by Six Flags, but they still have been able to add some things to the park over the past few decades. So if we look at our roller coaster count here, we have Boomerang, which is a multi-looping Boomerang of Vekoma. We have Hoot and Holler, a mini mine train, so we just go in the other category. We have Mind Eraser, a Vekoma dreaded SLC, which is both a not-on-the-track inverted coaster with multiple loops. We have Moto Coaster, a motorbike coaster, so the coasters look like motorcycles, and that is a launch coaster, so we have one launch coaster. Predator, which is a big wooden coaster, so we add one to wood. Ride of Steel is an all-time favorite airtime machine by Intamin, so it's both a standout coaster and an airtime machine. So we have a standout and an airtime, that's good. We have Tantrum, a multi-looping Gerst Flower Eurofighter, so another multi-looper, and Viper, a multi-looping aero coaster. So we have one standout coaster, that's good. We don't have to focus too much on making anything that stands out. Airtime, we already have an airtime machine. Multi-looper, we already have 4 of those. We already have an inverted coaster, so not on the track is counted. We have a wooden coaster, a launch coaster, and a coaster that's just in the other category of not fitting any of the main categories. So what we're currently missing is spin and water. So we're looking for a coaster that spins and also a water coaster. I've got 2 ideas for that, for this park that fits the budget just right. So let's look at the to-do list. Our priorities are park improvements, budget coasters, and flat rides. I think we can add 3 flat rides to the park, 2 coasters, and some improvements to the rides. Let's move on to the first priority on our list, park improvements. And that first one is Mind Eraser getting new trains. The new trains by Vekoma for its dreaded SLC model makes it so that the ride is actually fun and just doesn't beat you up. If you've ever ridden a Vekoma SLC, you know the number one problem is that your head bangs around a lot, and it is not enjoyable for your knees or legs either if you're a tall person. So if you're a tall person like me, your legs and shins get beat up, and if you're anybody except for a really small kid, your head gets completely destroyed on this ride. So the new trains don't have those head restraints and have some shin guards so that your feet do not get absolutely pulverized. So I think the new trains make it so that these rides are actually fun to ride instead of just absolute pain trains. The next park improvement is putting more Titan track on Predator. Predator is one of, if not the roughest coaster in America. Roughest wooden coaster, I should clarify. Roughest wooden coaster in America. Wooden coasters are usually rougher than steel coasters, but this one is especially brutal. It's just a rumble track. It makes you feel like you have square wheels, but you're also getting beat up by a bunch of professional wrestlers while going over those hills. So the best thing for this coaster is GCI's Titan track. They've already added some Titan track to this, and people have said that it made the first half of the ride better, but they need some on the second half. And boy, I will agree, the second half looks still absolutely painful. It looks like freaking John Cena, The Undertaker, and Triple H are just on your freaking back, just completely pulverizing and knuckle grinding your neck as you go through the back section. So this needs Titan track on the back section, and I think that'll make the ride just a little bit less painful. Alright, and we're into priority number 2, budget coasters. First, let's deal with our spinning coaster, Wild Mouse by Reverchon. Reverchon produces some cheap coasters, and a spinning Wild Mouse is one of their cheap models, and honestly, this is a plus. Not just because it is cheap, but also it knocks out our spinning ride while also being super cheap. So a Reverchon Wild Mouse in the middle of the park, I'll show you guys where in a minute, but it knocks out, as you can see on the right hand side. It adds a +1 to our spin category, meaning that we don't have to focus on any more spinning coasters. And I think the Reverchon Wild Mouse go in the middle of the park. That little area right there is a perfect plot for the Reverchon spinning Wild Mouse, and it'll be right in the middle of the park so people can ride it and feel happy that there's a spinning ride in the park, and parents can love seeing their child spin around while they eat ice cream, because what I've figured out, not a lot of parents enjoy riding this coaster. Just kids and teens like spinning around in these coasters. I don't really see any adults having fun on these. Just teenagers and kids for the most part. So, fun coaster for kids, and the adults can sit and eat ice cream while watching their kids on it. The next budget coaster is a Mock Power Splash. So we need a water coaster for the park. We have a little lake area near the campground. Let's put in a Mock Power Splash. Get the water coaster out of the way. This also adds another launch coaster to the park, so I think that's pretty cool. So here's where I give Darien Lake the ultimatum. Do you want to have a record-breaking coaster in your park, or just a basic clone in your park? Because the basic clone is just a Mock Power Splash. But Mock has suggested that they're working on a model that is a Mock Power Splash, but it's called a Mock Power Loop. It is Mock Power Splash, but it has a loop in the middle of it instead of a hill. So instead of a hill, there is a loop. It's a little bit longer, but it'll still fit in Darien Lake. So I think that if they want to go for a record-breaking coaster as the first water coaster to have a loop in it, then I think they should go for it. But otherwise, if they want to land on the cheaper option, they just get the Mock Power Splash. But if they want to splurge and become a record-breaking Six Flags park and have a little roller coaster memorabilia in their park with a record breaker, first of its kind inverting water coaster, then they should go for the Mock Power Loop. But anyway, it's their choice. And of course, the Mock Power Loop should go right here, the fun-sized lake next to the big lake. Obviously, we don't want to make the big lake that it's known for, the big Darien Lake that it's known for. We don't want to ruin that, so we'll just put it in the fun-sized lake next to the boomerang ride. It'll fit perfectly in that fun-sized lake for the Power Splash and the Power Loop as well. So it's all up to them. Do they want a record-breaking coaster with the Power Loop, or just go with the cheaper option of the Power Splash? Their choice. We'll see what happens. Alright, and then to kick off this video with a final priority, we add 3 flat rides that this park desperately needs. A pendulum, so just a general pendulum ride. These are getting a little bit more popular as of late, so adding a pendulum makes sense. Swan boats. Honestly, if you have a big lake, like that camping lake, if you don't have a swan boat style flat ride, I mean, what are you doing? You have a big giant lake and you don't have anything to do on it? at least add some swan boats, man. They're really cheap maintenance, and they really don't do that much, besides just provide a nice experience for guests. And then the train ride. The fact that there's a Six Flags park that doesn't have a train ride is detrimental. Like, that is the number one thing that you're missing for the park, and honestly, that's probably the first thing I would do to this park, is add a train. So, the fact that they don't have a train is very disappointing, and I think they should have that. So the train ride, I think, should go through the forest on the right side of the park, next to Viper and the go-karts, goes through that huge open forest, and adds a train ride that is much needed for a park that doesn't have one. Honestly, if a Six Flags park doesn't have a train, I don't think they're a Six Flags park, which technically this is only owned and operated. This is operated by Six Flags, it's not owned by it, so makes a little bit more sense that it's only operated by Six Flags, but still they need a train. Almost all big amusement parks like this need a train. Alright, so let's look at a possible timeline. In 2025, they add new trains for Mind Eraser and Titan Track Predator. So they do that first priority that I talked about, which is park improvements. In 2026, they get their first new coaster, the Spinning Wild Mouse by Reverchon, put it in the middle of the park, and that is their cheap middle ground coaster. Next, in 2027, they get two flat rides. They get the Swan Boats, because Swan Boats are cheap, and they put them on the camping lake. And they get the much-needed train ride that the park desperately needs. In 2028, they get their Delirium Pendulum ride, makes sense, cheap flat ride option. And then in 2029, they go for either the record-breaking Mach Power Loop or the cheaper option of the Mach Power Splash, filling out their coaster roster and making them get a perfect score on the roller coaster chart. Alright, and possible names for these coasters: the Spinning Wild Mouse, Spinsanity, makes sense, kind of just a basic Six Flags name for spinning rides. Swan Boats are called Swift Swans. Train ride, Lakewood Railroad. It can also be called Darien Lake Railroad, but I thought Lakewood made sense because it's on a lake but also in a forest, so Lakewood Railroad. The Delirium Pendulum ride, I would call Revolution because it spins, so just add another spinning style name. And the Mach Power Splash or Loop, call it Typhoon. Makes sense, basic water ride name. So Spinsanity, Swift Swans, Lakewood Railroad, Revolution, and Typhoon. Alright, we already talked about the Spinsanity Wild Mouse. It's going in the center of the park with that little tree area in the middle of the park. Swift Swans will go on the big lake so that the lodge, as well as everyone in the park and the campsite, can have access to them. Lake Road Railroad, of course, goes around that big open forest. Revolution, of course, as a pendulum ride, can be fit pretty much anywhere, but I decided to put it in the empty space by the Spinning Wild Mouse and the Thunder Canyon water ride. And then Typhoon goes in the fun-size lake next to the big lake. Alright, and we look at our chart. When adding Spinsanity and Typhoon, you get one standout, one airtime, 4 multi-loopers, 1 not on the track, 1 wood, 1 spinny coaster, 2 launches, 1 water, and 1 non-conforming other coaster. And I think that's a pretty good score for Darien Lake. So, for 2030 and beyond, possible new plots of land for future development. We've already covered basically the middle of the park, but there are some other places to put big coasters. On the right-hand side, with the train now going through the forest, that opens up that big middle plot for something interesting, maybe a B&M coaster of some sort. There's also a big plot of land next to Howdy's Ridge and Mind Eraser, so something near the front entrance of near the Performing Arts Center. You could also put maybe a B&M flying coaster or B&M floorless coaster. Then next to the main gate, you've got a medium-sized plot, and by Ride of Steel over on the left, you also have another medium-sized plot. So 2 medium-sized plots and 2 large plots for coaster developments and other land developments in the future. Alright, that is going to be the end of this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Like if you like, dislike if you don't, subscribe if you like it, and comment down below your thoughts. I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you so much, have a blessed day, and toodaloo!